Muriel Bowser. Our
The
regularly
best city in the world, and soon to be the 51st state. We are here to brief out on three things, and then I will be available for questions. I want to acknowledge and thank all of the members of the council who are able to attend. Charles Allen from Ward 6. Give Charles a big round of applause. And let me also congratulate and acknowledge Robert White on his re-election or election. Councilmember Breanne Nadeau from Ward 1. Councilmember Anita Bonds at large. And Councilmember Brandon Todd. Let me also congratulate you on a full 4-year term. I also want to acknowledge and thank for all of their support and advocacy, the members of the statehood delegation, Senator Strauss, who's here, give him a big round of applause, Senator Brown, who's here, and Representative Garcia, congratulations on your reelection as well. And we've also been joined by the Ward 2 council member who just won a well-deserved 4-year term again. So let me thank them all. So I want to, as you all know, we had a press conference plan to talk about our affordable housing preservation strike force, which we're very excited to give you an update about, as well as our statehood referendum, and we will be giving you a quick briefing about that. And then we will talk about the January 20th inauguration of Donald Trump in Washington, D.C. So with that, I want to turn to Brian Kenner and Polly Donaldson, who are going to talk a little bit more about our housing preservation strike force. But let me just say a couple of things. I think you know when we took office, we set a clear goal that we would focus on growing the middle class in Washington, D.C. We wanted to make sure that no matter where a person lived or what their background or income was, that they would be able to find affordable housing in the District of Columbia. And we are using all the tools at our disposal across all 8 wards to get there. In 2016, we spent a record $106 million of the Housing Production Trust Fund, the most that has been spent in a single year on affordable housing in the District of Columbia. And that is more than any other city in the country spends. And today we will announce 13 new affordable housing projects as part of that commitment. Production, however, is only half of the equation. Preservation has to be on our minds and part of our policy and programs as well. We are very clear that we have 13,000 affordable housing units being using federal or local subsidies that are threatened with expiration. The covenants keeping them affordable can and will expire. That is why one of my earliest initiatives was to establish the Housing Preservation Strike Force. I want to thank Councilmember Bonds and Councilmember Silverman who participated on that strike force. It was an 18-member short-term board that was charged with looking at those vulnerable units and making recommendations to protect and preserve those units. Last June, the strike force presented me with 6 initial recommendations, and today I'm announcing the release of the full report, which digs deeper into these recommendations. Let me acknowledge and thank Councilmember Silverman, who has joined us, and also Councilmember Grasso and Councilmember Alexander, who have joined us as well. So with that, I'm going to turn for a quick update from Deputy Mayor Kenner and Director Polly Donaldson from DHCD.
Thank you very much, Mayor. As most people know, in economic development, the mayor has charged me with 3 things: making sure that we focus on increasing tax revenue in the District of Columbia, making sure that we get DC residents jobs, and obviously one of the reasons why we're here today, which is making sure that we focus on affordable housing. It is actually easy for me to focus on affordable housing because if you come into my office, you are faced with our ticker, which shows you exactly how many units we have produced, how many are in our pipeline, and I think most importantly, how many families and how many people we are impacting as it relates to affordable housing. As the mayor mentioned, she has committed $100 million, one of the largest allocations in the country towards affordable housing. There was a recent article actually in the Washington Post that actually mentioned that the mayor is really at the forefront of local officials nationally in terms of thinking about affordable housing. You know, that charge means something very much not only to me as being the deputy mayor for planning and economic development, but obviously to our director of housing and community development, Polly Donaldson, as well. Polly really has been tasked with trying to do more with more, and I think that she has really responded in that way. Most people know Polly's background in Washington, D.C., but if you don't, she's really one of the leaders in affordable housing that we have. And so we are very thankful that she is guiding our ship. And thank you. And even more thankful that Polly has done more with more, and she is here to talk a little bit about some of those efforts. So Polly, please come up.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I really appreciate the leadership and the vision of our mayor, of our deputy mayor, and of the whole team. Thank you particularly to the mayor for your commitment to affordable housing. It is truly making DC a force on the national front as well. When we spoke about this strike force, you asked me to be bold, to be action-oriented, and to develop solutions so that our city could preserve the affordable housing at risk. And I think that the strike force accomplished what you wanted to achieve. At this time, I would like to recognize all of the strike force members that are present today. Would you please stand? Thank you. Thank you for your service. It's been an honor to serve as the chair and work alongside this esteemed group of professionals. And now on to the detailed recommendations and action plan. First, establish a preservation unit. Next year, the hiring process, meaning this fiscal year, will be for staffing the preservation unit, the district's central resource to preserve existing affordable housing and identify new opportunities. The unit, which will be housed at DHCD, will be led by a preservation officer and will add additional staff in the next year. Second, provide seed funding to a public-private preservation fund. Timing is crucial when it comes to financing housing preservation projects, and the earlier we move, the better leverage we have. The district will provide seed money to the Public-Private Preservation Fund, and that will enable other investments in preservation deals and increase the likelihood of successful outcomes in this deal. Third, we will be implementing a small properties preservation and affordability program. In fact, the mayor did announce this program earlier in the summer, and it's called the Great Spaces, Healthy Places program, being implemented with our colleagues at DCRA as well as at DHCD. This is the way that we can help prevent naturally affordable buildings that have some issues with repairs, maybe undercapitalized, need some help in doing that in order to maintain its affordability. And we will be, that program is launched. Actually, you can see the requirements online on the DHCD website as well. Fourth, implement DOPA, which is the District Opportunity to Purchase Act. It's an untapped resource. It's been on the books, but it hasn't been implemented. We want to use that to preserve the affordability of rental housing. The DOPA requires rental property owners to give the district the opportunity to purchase buildings consisting of 5 or more units as long as 25% of those units are affordable. It's been on the books since 2008. We will have draft regulations released in FY17, and we will fund and implement the DOPA law in FY18. Fifth, improve preservation under TOPA, which is the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act. TOPA is a unique program. It's not just in the district, but nationwide. And for more than 30 years, tenant groups across the city have successfully used TOPA to help buy the buildings and keep them safe and affordable. We want to make some refinements to TOPA and are working on technical fixes and other improvements to include implementing new pre-development and technical assistance to get tenants in an even better position to buy their buildings. We are unique in this program, I will say, and cities are looking to us for guidance in developing their own TOPA programs. 6, and finally, we want to create programs to allow low-income senior renters to age in place. Yes, indeed. Thank you. This is DHCD working with the Office on Aging and also developing projects like the Plaza West project of intergenerational housing with seniors and families, and then also looking at other new strategies to allow seniors to stay in their housing as well. In addition, I have the pleasure of announcing the 13 projects that have been selected under the 2016 RFP from the Housing Production Trust Fund. Yes, it is good. And these 13 development teams will be producing or preserving housing that will produce nearly 1,200 affordable units across the district.
All right.
The teams are, for preservation projects, 5610 Colorado Avenue Northwest Cooperative. This is in Ward 4, and the cooperative is the developer as well. Fort Stevens Place Apartments, 1339 Fort Stevens Drive, Northwest, also Ward 4, by the Community Housing Incorporated. Partner Arms 2 at 4506 Georgia Avenue, also Ward 4, Transitional Housing Corporation. Also known now as Housing Up, as I recall, yes. The Brookland Place Apartments, 617 Hamlin Street Northeast, that's in Ward 5. And that is the Wesley Housing Development Corporation in partnership with the tenants. Delta Towers at 1400 Florida Ave. Yes, I got a lot of correspondence on that one, indeed. Delta Towers is at 1400 Florida Avenue Northeast in Ward 5, and the developers are Dante Partners and Fort Lincoln Newtown Corporation. Maplewood Courts on Hartford Street Southeast in Ward 8, Hop Meadow Development, DC LLC, and Hop Meadow Development, Inc. Now, for new production, and these are some really exciting new projects, and again, spread across the city. First, Abrams Hall, which is in Building 14 on the Walter Reed campus, Ward 4. Urban Atlantic and Heinz Interest Limited Partnership are the developers. 1164 Bladensburg Road Northeast in Ward 5. That's being done by the Neighborhood Development Company and Arton Bladensburg LLC. Diane's House at 2619 Bladensburg Road Northeast, also Ward 5. Flattery and Collins Development LLC and Diane's House Ministries. Liberty Place Apartments in Ward 6 in the Mount Vernon Triangle, National Housing Trust Enterprise Preservation Corporation, and IBF Development. St. Elizabeth's East Housing, 1000 Alabama Southeast, Ward 8, the Anacostia Economic Development Corporation, and Flattery and Collins Development LLC. City View at 2850 Douglas Place Southeast in Ward 8, William C. Smith is the developer. And then finally, Parkway Overlook Apartments on Robinson Place Southeast. Yes, long awaited and with eager tenants ready, wanting to move back. This is being developed by the DC Housing Authority. Thank you. For all the developers who are here, would you please stand so we can recognize your outstanding applications and your willingness to support affordable housing in the district. Thank you all. Thank you very much. These projects and the amount of financial commitment this administration has given and the speed in which it occurred has never happened in the District of Columbia. And I want to thank personally also the DHCD team members that are here and back at the office who helped make that happen. Thank you. That's real money going to both new housing developments and the preservation of existing affordable housing. So thank you all very much. And now I would like to hand the podium back to the mayor. Thank you.
So this is the Housing Preservation Strike Force final report. I assume that we have it up on the website and we can tell you where there is as well. And the council members should also acknowledge and recognize that there may be some budget implications to the recommendations, which will be forthcoming in the upcoming budget. But if we say we care about affordable housing, let's put our money where our mouth is. And that is what we need to do. So, yesterday, 80% of Washingtonians voted for statehood for Washington, D.C. Their votes confirm what we always knew, that Washingtonians are tired of being treated like second-class citizens. We are perfectly willing to pay our fair share of taxes, and in some cases, more than our fair share of taxes. More than 22 states and more per capita than most. Yet, we don't have a vote in the House of Representatives, and our senators do not, our Senator Strauss and Brown do not have a vote in the United States Senate. What we are arguing for and have argued for is full equality with every other American. We're not asking for any more, but we are asking for our fair share. We started this campaign with the New Columbia Statehood Commission, and I want to acknowledge Chairman Mendelson, who co-chairs the committee with me. Give him a big round of applause. And our senators and representatives who make up the rest of the Statehood Commission. I also want to acknowledge my senior advisor, Beverly Perry. Give her a huge round of applause. Beverly really galvanized with a lot of energy and great strategy, great legal minds, activists who've been involved in this issue for decades, and elected officials to help us chart a new path towards statehood. And obviously, part of our strategy was to be ready and when we had like-minded people elected in the White House and in the Congress. And we are prepared for that day when it comes. What we have is a fantastic Constitution that has had the input of residents across the city. The council has taken an initial vote on that Constitution and included a timeline for when the Constitution would go back out to the residents for further review and updating. The council also updated the name of our new state, which has gotten a lot of positive response from around all of Washington, D.C., which we so appreciate. And our charge has not changed. We have been now compelled by 80% of the voters to carry the message of statehood forward. And I will work with the council on how they will prepare the resolution to go up to the new Congress in January. It's also our great job, and if this last few months hasn't taught us anything, is that we have a lot of public education to do in our own city, but certainly in the states. And we have been compelled as well to focus on a strategy to educate people in the 50 states about what we need to achieve full equality for the District of Columbia. So we will look forward to keeping you up to date. I imagine that the Statehood Commission will convene in the coming days to do any additional work that we need to do to get ready for how we move forward. But with that, I noticed that we have been joined by the chairman of the council, and we're also joined by all of the members of the commission, and I would like to invite them to the podium for any quick remarks. Chairman.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah. Good afternoon. I will be very brief. As you know, the council approved a draft constitution. It was great, the result yesterday with the voters on the referendum. And in accordance with the terms of the referendum, we will be preparing, as the mayor said, working with her, the submission to Congress with the new year. I think that we've done a good job in the time that we've spent over the last 6-7 months in trying to put together a good petition, a viable petition, and that puts forth the case for statehood. I think it's important that we keep the ball rolling. That's really what we're doing, is keeping this issue alive, keeping the pressure up, keeping the attention to this matter. And if we remain focused that that's what our goal is, I think it's all to the good. There'll be some challenges ahead next year. The Congress isn't, and the White House isn't looking exactly the way we want it to look, but the issue is an important issue, and it's one of principle. As long as we remember that this is about the principle of full citizenship for the residents of the nation's capital, I think that we're on the right side. I'll just add, parenthetically, I met this morning with a legislator from Mexico City. Why am I bringing that up? Because earlier this year, the national government of Mexico granted statehood to the national capital of Mexico. Granted statehood. And I don't understand why they can do that south of the border and we can't do that in the United States of America.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I want to read a really short statement. The fact that more than 500,000 Americans living in the District of Columbia are denied a single voting representative in Congress is clearly a historic wrong. The overarching principle of the American founding was that laws should be based upon the consent of the governed. The first generation of Americans threw tea in Boston Harbor because they were denied a voting representative in the national legislature in England. Given their commitment to representative democracy, it is inconceivable to me that our founders would have been so willing to accept the denial of representation to so great a throng of Americans in perpetuity. Those are not the words of Paul Strauss or any member of the New Columbia Statehood Commission. Those words were spoken by the Vice President-elect of the United States, Mike Pence. And a quote that he gave on the floor of the House of Representatives when he rose as one of the few Republicans to support what was then our House Voting Rights Act. I have been an advocate of full equality for the citizens of the District of Columbia for over 30 years. And this January, when we swear in a new president, it will mark my 20th year as our senator. I did not expect this to be a quick fight or an easy fight, and I am not giving up on this fight. An uphill climb is still a path forward, and I want to congratulate our mayor and the other members of the commission who went with me to Cleveland, Ohio, at the Republican National Convention, where we began the challenging job of educating and working with Republicans on the issue of DC statehood. Not every Republican opposes equality for the citizens of the District of Columbia, just as sadly not every Democrat was with us. There are principled members of both parties who agree that all Americans deserve equality, and as challenging as it may be, I look forward to working with our new Congress, many new members of the House, some exciting new senators, as we go forward. And let me also note something that in this dramatic news cycle may have gone unnoticed. Our fellow colonists in the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico elected a governor who has committed to replicating the Tennessee Plan in Puerto Rico. That is not a race, that is not a competition, but that is allies in the principled fight that all Americans deserve equality wherever you live in the United States of America. So we have a lot of work to do, but we have some exciting days ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. Senator Brown?
Thank you. Thanks for coming in. And let me thank the members of the commission and the mayor and her staff for a job well done. 80% really says something. I've been in politics for 35 years, and I can tell you 80% of the American people do not agree on a lot of things, especially these days. But, you know, as the mayor pointed out, our original plan was to go through this quickly so that we could take advantage of the new Democratic president, the new Democratic House, and the new Democratic Senate. Obviously, we need to move on to Plan B at this point. And this is going to, again, be, as the mayor said, the time where we have to put our money where our mouth is. We need a nationwide PR plan because we need to take our fight to the people. Taking it to Capitol Hill is not going to help us if we don't have the support of the American people. And we know that DC Vote did a survey that showed that 80% of America thinks that we have the same representation that they have. Now, we bandy around the term Tennessee plan, but the Tennessee plan, I got to tell you, was well-funded, and we need to do that with our version of the Tennessee plan. We need to fund this. We need to get this going. We need to take our fight to America. Look, if we can spend $200 million on a streetcar line, we can spend some money promoting DC statehood. And we have a mandate now from the people of the District of Columbia. 80% of the people that elect all of us have said that they want this done. And we need to get it done by putting resources behind it. So thanks very much for coming today. I think this is a great day for statehood, but it's only a first step. And I'd like to introduce my colleague, Franklin Garcia, who just got reelected, by the way.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thank you, Mayor Bowser, for your vision for renewing the Tennessee plan. And I don't know if everybody that got reelected or elected last night is going to have a chance to say thank you. So on behalf of them, I want to thank you for electing us to serve you again. Let me also thank all the folks who work so hard for statehood. DC for Democracy, Anise Jenkins is here with Free DC, and all those folks who really work very hard to get an 80% approval for statehood. You know, I guess the last thing I'm going to say is that I am willing to extend that olive branch, you know, but I do realize that I woke up to that nightmare that I did not want to wake up to, unfortunately. And let me just say that in the Latino community, we have a lot of soul searching to do, because hearing that we actually had more Latinos come out and vote for this man than we had for Mitt Romney, who talked about self-deportation to our people, when this gentleman just came and increased that rhetoric. It's just amazing. So we have a lot of internal conversation to talk about it within our community. Thank you so much, everybody.
So thank you to the members of the Statehood Commission, and I'd like you, if you could remain available for questions, and we're just going to go through this last item. So let me, on behalf of the residents of the District of Columbia, congratulate President-elect Donald Trump. And if you are like all of us in this building, you listened to Secretary Clinton and her message to all of her supporters and all Americans, followed by President Obama's message to us all. I was heartened to hear the president say, which is what I told my team, to keep your heads up, that President Obama certainly had 8 years of service to the American people that he can be proud of, and I am certainly proud as well. Secretary Clinton, I am an unabashed supporter of her campaign and the values that her campaign represented, and certainly the promise that it held to break a final glass ceiling for women in our country. But the people have spoken, and one of our privileges as being the nation's capital is that we become the hometown of the new president. And on January 20th, it will be no different. We will host a inauguration for the new president, as well as millions of Americans who may come to celebrate the peaceful transfer of power, which is a hallmark of our democracy. So while there are many things that we disagree with Mr. Trump on, certainly our politics do not align, and certainly we recognize that many of our residents today are anxious, are angry, and are hurting. I've heard already this morning from immigrant families who do not know what new policies in a Trump administration will mean for their families. Already, we've heard from educators about anxiety about how to talk to children about what it means to have this very contentious election solved in such an unexpected way. Already, I've seen the female members of my staff wonder what it means for how women will be valued in the workplace. And so these are all issues that we confront confront head-on, and that we certainly are going to be trying to address with all of our agencies. Very practically speaking, we're focused on the next budget and making sure that district priorities are focused there as well. We will spend some time analyzing the stated policies of the Trump campaign and what they may look like in a Trump administration to see what impact it could have on our budget, policies, and programs. And we will assemble a team to do exactly that. If you heard the president-elect's comments last night, I think that we found some a very significant area of common ground, and that is his focus and ours on how we rebuild American infrastructure. And certainly we have those concerns in Washington, D.C. So to the extent that the federal government can be focused on roads and bridges and public transportation, and how those public infrastructure projects can put D.C. residents to work, that's certainly an area of common ground. I will say that the first order of business for Washington, D.C. is to work with the president-elect's presidential inauguration committee. We have been through this many times. Our home, of course, every 4 years, our Homeland Security Division with the Metropolitan Police Department work with our federal partners in preparation for the inauguration. The preparations have begun months ago, but they kick into a different gear now that we have a president-elect, and he will assemble what they call the PIC, the Inauguration Committee, that will work with all the law enforcement agencies. So I asked Chris Geldart, who is our Director of Homeland Security, to come and give us a quick update on what we should expect next.
Thank you, Mayor Bowser. The district has been focusing, as the mayor said, on the 2017 presidential inauguration since last April. As the capital of the United States and the seat of the federal government, the District of Columbia works in coordination with our federal, local, regional, and private sector partners to ensure a seamless oversight and an integrated management of this and many other national special security events. In the coming days, we'll meet with the President-elect's Inauguration Committee, as we have in every other presidential inauguration, to coordinate the activities that will take place during the inaugural period. Managing an event of this caliber requires a vast amount of resources, and to provide a perspective and give just a few examples, in addition to our Metropolitan Police Department officers, more than 3,000 law enforcement personnel from around the country will be assisting with the security and ceremonial details during the inaugural period, as they do every 4 years. The National Guard will also be present with more than 7,000 guardsmen to provide additional support to district agencies in executing their missions, including traffic control, crowd management, technical services, and serving as ambassadors to the city. Hundreds of thousands of people will visit the district to participate in this event. So whether you are a district resident, a business owner, a commuter, or a visitor, I encourage everyone to be planning now for the inauguration. Over the coming weeks, the district will provide you with details about everything from charter bus permits to licenses for food vending and alcohol sales to how inaugural events will affect your movement in and around the city. The district has a long history of successfully executing inaugurations and major national special security events in our nation's capital. Leveraging the longstanding relationships with all our partners and the public, the district will be prepared for the inauguration of the next President of the United States on January 20th. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
And so let me just close also with recognizing the very important local races that we had in the district yesterday as well. I already acknowledged several of the council members, and I want to congratulate also Councilmember Grasso on his reelection. Give him a big round of applause. And to congratulate Trayon White, who will be the new Ward 8 council member, and Vince Gray, who will be the new Ward 7 council member. Give them a round of applause. And to the school board members, the new school board members, we will welcome them, as well as a host of advisory neighborhood commissioners all across the district. So not only do I want to acknowledge the winners, but I want to acknowledge all of the contenders who put their hat in their ring to wage campaigns in our city. So congratulations to you all. Congratulations. So I am happy to take a few questions with those assembled. Yes, sir.
Mayor Bowser, Senator Brown said that you need to move on to Plan B with statehood, and he suggested a PR campaign. Is there a Plan B? Do you agree with him that the city needs to spend more time on educating people about statehood than lobbying a hostile Congress?
I think we need to do both, which is what I said at the outset, that we do need to spend a lot more time being strategic about how we go about educating other states, and we need to figure out what we're willing to pay to do that. I thought it was very important, which I think I discussed with you a few days ago, that I would really take a cue from the people of the District of Columbia, and they sent us a strong voice and vote for statehood. That would really inform our discussions with the council about what we're willing to invest in. Yes, sir.
So statehood aside, I mean, there's obviously the chance that the Republican Congress, Republican president could be a little bit more, I guess, aggressive towards the district when it comes to laws passed by the DC Council and signed by you. There could be death and dignity. There could be gun laws that Congress wants to change. How are you going to address that? Are you going to try to talk to President-elect Trump about it? How are you going to deal with Congress when they try to step into what's otherwise DC laws?
Well, we've lived with that. Certainly, I've lived with that threat the entire time I've been on the council, and I think all the lawmakers here would attest to that. I think that the Congress and the new president are going to be focused on their agendas and figuring out, what the agenda of the new president is, how he's going to work with the Congress. And I anticipate, like in most cases, even in our current situation where we've had a Republican Congress and a president in the White House, that they typically don't get involved in our issues. We know the hot button issues that they take interest in, and I don't think there's any real difference in how the Congress would react. We, of course, want to make sure that the new president, and I would say this about any president, knows exactly what we do in the District of Columbia. We want to dispel any notions that are sometimes mistaken about our city, and focus on the things where there are some common ground, and I think that we can find some. Yes, sir. Sam.
Yes. You're going to have a different city council as well. I noticed you mentioned Trayon White. That's great. Do you anticipate it'll be more difficult to get your program through the council with some of the new members?
Well, this is, I was on the council for 8 years. I've worked with just everybody who's coming on the council. I've worked with in one way or another. And one thing about our city, we come from different places often, but typically we want the same things for our city. We come about it at different angles, and we often tweak each other's policies. But largely, we want to invest in the prosperity of more Washingtonians and affordable housing and public education and public safety. So while you will find that I have disagreements with the Council of the District of Columbia, largely, they get most of what they want, and largely I get most of what I advance, and we tend to work together very, very well. Yes.
Bowser, in the past, the mayor of the district has participated in the inaugural parade and the inaugural events. You boycotted the opening of the Trump Hotel, you said, because of Trump's politics. If you're invited, will you participate in the inaugural? Will you march in the parade?
I will participate in the inaugural. I'm the mayor of the District of Columbia, and I will represent the District of Columbia. To be clear, I felt strongly that the opening of the Trump Hotel was a campaign event. The campaign's over. Yes.
Mayor Bowser, just following up on this point a little bit, you said you've received some notes, points of concern from residents about what it'll be like to be under a Trump administration in this town. What can you say to DC residents
a significant number of African American or Hispanic, Latino, about how to embrace this next president. If he shows up at their school to stage an event, or is around town at President's office.
Well, my job is to check on how our residents are feeling. We are going to touch base with the Mayor's Office of Latino Affairs today and our commission today, as well as our Commission on African American Affairs and some other issues around public safety. I think people are concerned about, have some anxiety about, to figure out how we're going to do some community engagement. And I'm going to take my cue from the people as to how they're feeling and what they need. I can't give them any advice right now on interactions. But I think also, Aaron, I mentioned we want to examine, to the extent there's a lot unknown about the policy agenda of the president-elect. So we want to spend some time looking at his policy agenda and how we think it might convert to policy in an administration. We have some things to think about. We know he said pretty unequivocally that they want to repeal Obamacare. Well, that has an impact on the District of Columbia. We have stood up a healthcare benefits exchange that has federal funding and other implications. So there may be other things like that. We had this question, if they defund Planned Parenthood, what does it mean to healthcare for women in the District of Columbia and around the country? So there are things that we want to drill down into for what is known about his policy agenda and start analyzing what it could mean if those policies are implemented.
You personally, there's been a lot of things, of course, on Twitter over the last several months. In July, you called Trump's comments on immigration idiotic. You repeatedly used the hashtag #LoveTrumpsHate. Amen that Pence is the chief enabler of Donald Trump. We treated Donald Trump as gross. I mean, you're not the only politician who has done this. I mean, what message do you want to give to President-elect Donald Trump today? Do you recant any of these?
I don't recant anything that I've said, but I do hope, and I've said this previously, and we have to take him at his word. He said he wants to bring non-supporters in. He wants to bring the country together. He wants to be the president for the people who voted for him and the people who didn't. And let me be real clear about something. 93% of the people in Washington, D.C. that I represent are in that category of people who didn't support him. When we think about this region, the Republican governor from Maryland, the Democratic governor from Virginia, didn't support him. So we want to work with the new president and move forward. But I do think that there's some repairing of relationships that have to be done if he's going to win the support of the people of the District of Columbia.
Mayor, you did talk about finding common ground with
Yes.
Mr. Trump when it comes to infrastructure.
Yes.
How do you think that would impact Metro? Do you plan on lobbying for any improvements to Metro from Mr. Trump?
Yes, we do, and again, we would have done that too if it was President Clinton or President Trump. We would have done that. Both of them had a focus on infrastructure, but I did kind of perk up when there wasn't a whole lot of substantive or policy message in his statement last night or during the night. But infrastructure was one of them, and rebuilding American infrastructure is certainly important. So we have a lot of federal interest in the district. Bridges that literally one they're about to close down in 2020 that belongs to the federal government that crosses our rivers, our metro system that carries federal employees, our National Park Service, which, what do you like to say, Jack? It moves at a slower than glacial pace.
They move at any pace.
If they move at any pace at all. So we think that there is quite a lot that Donald Trump can do. Now, I have taken issue with the way he describes inner cities, and certainly we want to, but to the extent that he is sincere about working in urban areas and working with cities, he should start with his new hometown, and we will work with him if he's willing to make help us and make the investments in infrastructure. And keep in mind that we include as part of our infrastructure these affordable housing units that are vulnerable. So I think that there is a lot that a new president can do to work with cities, and we can start with this one. Yes.
So just on, now that you brought up the issue of affordable housing, I think one thing that jumps out in the report is you have DOPA, this law that's passed in 2008, very well intentioned but never implemented. Did you get a sense going through this that there's a lot of tools that the district had at its disposal that it just wasn't using, or that it just kind of missed the boat a little bit on some of the affordable housing issues that now suddenly became a crisis?
No, that's not my sense. I think that certainly the district never really implemented a framework by which to judge when to use DOPA. But DOPA is not free. So that's what I always call. We can use DOPA, but some of these big projects, when we talk about saving big buildings, are 20, 40, 70, $150 million. And that's 100% of our annual allotment at this point. So I think that we could have put together a framework to evaluate projects before now, but we will do that. But we also have to remember, we can't just say, snap our fingers, we're going to use DOPA, because the money to pay for those buildings has to come from somewhere. Yes, sir.
So on these issues that Congress might take up in the new year, gun control, do you want to lay down any particular marker on that issue? You've been pretty clear that you think Congress should not touch DC gun control laws. Obviously, President-elect Trump has been a big supporter of the Second Amendment freedoms.
We're supportive of Second Amendment freedoms too, but we're also supportive of the ability of this elected legislature to make common sense laws to protect the residents of the District of Columbia. My view on that hasn't changed. Phil, do you want to add anything? Okay. Is there anything else? All right. Thank you, everybody.